You know, there's something rather amusing about the human condition. We spend our entire lives convinced that we are broken machines in need of constant repair. We walk around carrying this enormous toolkit of self-improvement, forever tinkering with ourselves, adjusting this, fixing that, as if we were automobiles that had rolled off the assembly line with defective parts. But what if I told you that this whole enterprise, this entire industry of self-fixing, is based on a fundamental misunderstanding? What if the very premise that you need to be fixed is the problem itself? Now I want you to imagine for a moment a wave on the ocean suddenly developing consciousness and declaring, "Oh my goodness, I'm all wrong. Look at me, I'm not solid like a rock. I keep changing shape. I rise and fall constantly. I must fix myself immediately. I need to become more stable, more permanent, more wave-like." How absurd would that be? The wave is already perfect, exactly as it is. It doesn't need to become more of a wave. It is the ocean expressing itself in wave form. But in our human drama, we've convinced ourselves of exactly this kind of absurdity. You see, we've been sold a story, haven't we? The story goes like this: you are fundamentally flawed. You have problems that need solving, issues that need addressing, aspects of yourself that need improvement. And if you just try hard enough, if you just find the right method, the right teacher, the right technique, you can finally fix yourself and become the person you're supposed to be. This story is so pervasive, so woven into the fabric of our culture, that we rarely question it. We simply accept that we are works in progress, rough drafts waiting to be edited into final form. But what if this story is not just wrong, but backwards? Let me tell you something that might sound scandalous to the self-improvement industry. You were never broken. You were never incomplete. You were never a problem that needed solving. The very idea that you need to be fixed is the only thing that needs fixing. Think about it this way. When you look at a tree, do you say, "Oh, that poor tree, it really needs to work on its branches. And those leaves, completely the wrong shade of green. If only it could fix itself, it might become a proper tree someday." Of course not. The tree is already magnificent exactly as it is. It's not trying to become anything other than what it naturally is. It grows, it changes, it responds to its environment, but it doesn't have a committee meeting with itself every morning to discuss its personal development goals. But we humans, we're different. We've developed this peculiar capacity to step outside ourselves and become our own critics, our own project managers, our own renovation crew. We look in the mirror and see not a miraculous expression of life, but a fixer-upper. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with learning, growing, or changing. A tree learns too. It learns which way to grow toward the light, how to sink its roots deeper, how to weather storms. But the tree doesn't torture itself about not being tall enough or worry that its bark isn't smooth enough. It simply responds naturally to what life presents. The difference is this: the tree trusts its own nature, but we've learned to mistrust ours. We've been taught that our natural impulses are suspect, that our spontaneous responses are probably wrong, that left to our own devices, we'll surely make a mess of things. So we develop this internal supervisor, this constant monitor that watches everything we do and evaluates it. Am I being productive enough? Am I responding correctly? Am I improving at the proper rate? Shouldn't I be further along by now? It's exhausting, isn't it? Like having a micromanager living inside your head, taking notes on your performance, and always finding you lacking. But here's what's really happening. This supervisor, this inner critic, this voice that insists you need constant improvement, it's not actually you. It's a collection of voices from your past, judgments you've absorbed, standards you've inherited from parents, teachers, society, and culture. You've internalized a whole committee of judges, and now they're running your life. making you feel perpetually inadequate, forever behind schedule in your own existence. But who is it that's aware of this committee? Who is it that can observe these thoughts, these judgments, these constant evaluations? There's something in you that watches all of this drama without being caught up in it. That something is what you really are. You are not the thoughts about yourself. You're not the judgments, the evaluations, the constant commentary. You are the awareness in which all of this appears and disappears like weather patterns in the sky. The sky is never damaged by the weather that moves through it. Storms come and go, but the sky remains vast and open. In the same way, thoughts about your inadequacy come and go, but your essential nature remains untouched. Now you might ask or never react, but surely I do have problems. I do make mistakes. There are things about myself I'd like to change. Of course. But here's the secret. You can make changes, learn new things, and grow in new directions without the story that you are fundamentally broken. Watch a child learning to walk. They fall down constantly. Do they create a narrative about being defective walkers? Do they develop a complex about their locomotion inadequacies? No. They simply get up and try again, not because they think they're broken, but because walking looks like fun. The learning happens naturally, playfully, without the overlay of self-judgment and improvement anxiety that we adults have developed such a talent for. You see, there are two completely different ways to approach change. One is from the assumption that you are broken and need fixing. The other is from the recognition that you are already whole and naturally evolving. The first way is like being a mechanic working on a faulty engine, always looking for what's wrong, what needs repair, what's not functioning properly. The second way is like being a gardener tending a plant, providing good conditions and trusting the natural intelligence of growth. The mechanic is always struggling against defects. The gardener is collaborating with life itself. Most of our approaches to personal development are mechanical. We treat ourselves like machines that need better programming, more efficient operating systems, upgraded hardware. We approach our emotions like software glitches, our habits like bugs in the code, our personalities like user interfaces that need redesigning. But what if you're not a machine at all? What if you're more like a garden, a living system that has its own wisdom about how to grow? When you trust this natural intelligence, something remarkable happens. You stop fighting with yourself and start flowing with yourself. Instead of trying to force yourself into some predetermined mold, you allow your unique shape to emerge. This doesn't mean you become passive or stop learning. It means you learn the way a river learns the landscape, by moving with it rather than against it. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. This sounds like making excuses for mediocrity. If I don't push myself to improve, won't I just stagnate? Doesn't this philosophy lead to complacency? But actually, the opposite is true. When you stop wasting energy fighting with yourself, when you stop the constant self-criticism and improvement anxiety, you free up enormous amounts of energy for actual living. Think about how much mental and emotional energy you spend every day evaluating yourself, worrying about whether you're doing life right, comparing yourself to others, setting goals and then beating yourself up for not meeting them quickly enough. Imagine if all that energy were available for simply being present to your actual experience, for responding creatively to what life presents, for enjoying the process of being alive. The person who knows they are already whole doesn't waste time on self-attack. They channel their energy into expression, creation, relationship, discovery. They play with life instead of working on themselves. Let me give you an analogy. How much attention is left for actually listening to the music? How much presence is available for feeling the keys under your fingers, for letting the melody move through you? But if you sit at the piano knowing that you don't need to be anything other than what you are in this moment, if you play not to fix yourself, but to let music happen through you, then something beautiful can emerge. You might make what others would call mistakes, but if you're not imprisoned by the concept of mistakes, those unexpected sounds might become the most interesting parts of your music. This is what I mean by stopping trying to fix yourself. It's not about stopping all effort or giving up on learning and growing. It's about changing your relationship to the whole process. Instead of approaching your life as a problem to be solved, you approach it as a mystery to be lived. Instead of seeing yourself as a project to be completed, you recognize yourself as an ongoing expression of life itself. And life is not a problem. Life is an activity. You don't solve life, you participate in it. You dance with it, you play with it. Now here's something that might surprise you. When you stop trying to fix yourself, you often find that the things you thought needed fixing begin to take care of themselves naturally. It's like the old saying about muddy water being best cleared by leaving it alone. When you stop stirring up the mud of self-criticism and improvement anxiety, the gewoon wat waarmee sprake is being honest. Feel on ourselves, we have declared so continue to end our smooth. When you stop stirring up the mud of self-criticism and improvement anxiety, the water of your natural clarity begins to settle. This happens because much of what we think is wrong with us is actually the result of our efforts to fix what was never broken in the first place. For example, you might think you have a problem with anxiety. So you try various techniques to fix your anxiety. You analyze it, fight it, avoid situations that trigger it, take courses on anxiety management. But all of this effort often creates more anxiety. Anxiety about having anxiety. Anxiety about not fixing your anxiety fast enough. But what if there's nothing wrong with feeling anxious sometimes? What if anxiety is just one of the many emotions that move through human consciousness, like clouds moving through the sky? When you stop making anxiety into a problem that needs solving, when you stop adding the story, "I shouldn't feel this way," on top of the feeling itself, the anxiety often naturally dissolves or becomes much more manageable. The same is true for jinya. You see, we've been conditioned to believe that we should feel a certain way all the time. Happy, confident, peaceful, productive. But this is like insisting that the weather should always be sunny and 75 degrees. Emotions are the weather of consciousness. Sometimes it's stormy, sometimes it's calm. Sometimes it's cloudy, sometimes it's clear. This isn't a malfunction of your emotional system. This is how emotions work. When you understand this, you can stop trying to control your emotional weather and simply learn to dress appropriately for whatever conditions arise. The same principle applies to personality traits we've been taught to see as flaws. Maybe you're naturally introverted in a culture that celebrates extroversion. Maybe you're a dreamer in a world that demands constant action. Maybe you're sensitive in an environment that values toughness. Instead of trying to fix these aspects of yourself, what if you recognize them as part of your unique contribution to the world? What if you stopped apologizing for your nature and started celebrating it? The oak tree doesn't try to become more like a pine tree. The river doesn't apologize for not being a mountain. They simply express their nature fully and beautifully. When you accept your own nature this completely, something magical happens. You stop wasting energy on being something you're not, and all that energy becomes available for being magnificently what you are. Now, this doesn't mean you never learn new skills or develop new capacities, but the learning comes from curiosity and joy rather than from a sense of inadequacy. You learn because growth is fun, not because you're broken. It's the difference between learning to paint because you love color and form versus learning to paint because you think you should be more creative. One is play, the other is work on yourself. Think about children again. They don't say, "I need to work on my imagination." They simply imagine. They don't set goals for becoming more playful. They simply play. The natural intelligence of growth takes care of everything without the overlay of self-improvement ideology. But somewhere along the way, we learned to distrust this natural intelligence. We were taught that we needed external authorities to tell us how to live, what to feel, who to be. We internalized these authorities and created a whole bureaucracy of self-management. We have departments of self-criticism, committees of goal setting, task forces of habit modification. We've turned our inner life into a corporation, complete with performance reviews and improvement plans. But underneath all this bureaucracy, your original nature is still there. It never went anywhere. It's been patiently waiting for you to remember that you were never broken in the first place. This original nature is not something you need to achieve or become. It's what you are when you stop trying to be anything else. It's what remains when you let go of all the stories about what's wrong with you. And what remains is quite extraordinary. Not extraordinary in the sense of being special or superior, but extraordinary in the sense of being natural, authentic, spontaneous, alive. You know, there's a wonderful paradox here. The more you try to improve yourself, the more you reinforce the idea that you need improvement. But the moment you recognize that you were never broken, improvement happens naturally, effortlessly, without the strain and struggle. It's like the difference between a plant that grows naturally toward the light and a plant that someone keeps pushing and pulling in different directions to make it grow faster. Which one do you think will flourish? When you trust your own nature, when you stop fighting with yourself, when you recognize that you are already a perfect expression of life, then growth happens the way flowers bloom naturally, beautifully, in their own timing. This is not a philosophy of complacency. This is a philosophy of trust. Trust in the intelligence that beats your heart without your conscious effort, that grows your hair, that heals your cuts, that dreams your dreams. The same intelligence that creates galaxies and governs the migration of birds is the intelligence that you are. Do you really think it needs your anxious supervision to operate properly? So here's my invitation to you. What if you conducted an experiment? What if just for one day you stopped trying to fix yourself? What if you approached that day not as a problem to be solved, but as a gift to be received? What if you met your emotions without trying to change them? What if you noticed your thoughts without judging them? What if you moved through your activities without constantly evaluating your performance? What if you treated yourself the way you would treat a good friend, with kindness, patience, acceptance, and humor? You might be surprised by what you discover. You might find that without the constant pressure of self-improvement, you naturally begin to relax. And in that relaxation, your authentic self begins to shine through. You might discover that you're actually quite wonderful exactly as you are. Not perfect in the sense of having no room for growth, but perfect in the sense of being a complete expression of life in this moment. And from that recognition, any changes that want to happen will happen easily, naturally, without force or struggle. Like a river that carves canyons, not through effort, but through persistent, gentle flow. This is the great secret that the self-improvement industry doesn't want you to know. You were never broken. You don't need to be fixed. You are already whole.